The first time I heard the emergency broadcast, the real one. Not the tests. I was standing in my kitchen holding a coffee mug that said, "World's Most Prepared Dad." My daughter Chloe had given it to me 2 Christmases ago. She was 14 then. She'd wrapped it in newspaper and handed it over with the kind of smile teenagers reserve for jokes they think are funnier than they are. I'd laughed. Everyone laughed. That was the point. I wasn't laughing on October 11th. The broadcast came through the radio I keep on the kitchen counter. Not my phone. Not the television. The Grundig shortwave I'd bought in 2019. The one my ex-wife Vanessa called the divorce antenna, because she said I paid more attention to its frequencies than I ever did to her. She wasn't wrong about that. She was wrong about why it mattered. The voice on the broadcast was calm in a way that made my hands shake. FEMA Region 7. Coordinated shelter in place for a minimum of 72 hours. Avoid contact with any individual displaying signs of disorientation, aggression, or open wounds inconsistent with visible trauma. The phrase, "open wounds inconsistent with visible trauma," is the kind of thing a bureaucrat writes when the truth is too large for plain language. But I'd spent 6 years reading between exactly those lines. I knew what it meant. Something was biting people. And the bites were doing something that couldn't be explained by the bites alone. My name is Graham Breck. I'm 51 years old. I was a residential contractor for 22 years in Chesterfield, Missouri, before I spent the back half of my 40s and every liquid dollar I had building a fully self-sustaining underground shelter beneath 40 acres of Ozark limestone I bought at auction. $514,000, if you want the exact number. Vanessa wanted the exact number during the divorce proceedings. Her attorney read it into the record and paused to let the judge absorb it. $500,000 on a hole in the ground. I remembered the judge's face. Mild, professionally neutral. The same face people make at parties when I mention the bunker, or made back when I still went to parties. A look that says, "I will not call you crazy to your face, but I'm recalibrating everything I assumed about you." That's the face the world had been making at me for 6 years. My brother Paul, my crew foreman, Danny, the guys at the supply house who filled my bulk orders for rebar and medical-grade air filters and looked at me like I was building a spaceship out of paranoia. Vanessa, who told me in the last real conversation we had before the papers that she didn't leave because of the money. She left because I'd built a future for a disaster and forgotten to build one for us. She was right about that too. But on October 11th, standing in my kitchen at 6:47 a.m. with the broadcast rolling and the coffee going cold and a mug my daughter gave me as a joke, I was right about everything else. And I need you to understand something before this story goes any further. Being right was the first thing that went wrong. I made 3 calls. Vanessa first, voicemail. Chloe second, she was with Vanessa that week. Custody alternating Wednesdays. Voicemail. My son, Owen, 19, sophomore at Mizzou, living in a dorm that might as well have been a petri dish. He picked up on the 4th ring. "Dad, it's not even 7. Pack a bag, get in your car, drive to the property. Don't stop for gas if you can make it on what's in the tank." Silence. Then that sound, the recalibration sound. The sharp exhale through the nose. "Dad, come on." "Owen, I will explain everything when you get here. Please get in the car." He hung up. I didn't know if he was coming. I drove to the property in 31 minutes. I'd timed the route so many times it felt liturgical. The gate code, the gravel road, the walk-down entrance concealed beneath a tool shed that looked deliberately neglected. I powered up the main electrical panel, pressurized the water system from the well, and initiated the air handling cycle. The bunker came alive the way it always did during my quarterly tests, lights, fans, the hum of the lithium battery bank. But this time, there was a different quality to it. The sound of a thing being used for the first time, for the reason it was built. I sat on the bottom bunk of Chloe's room, the one she'd never slept in. The one with the purple bedspread she didn't know I'd picked, and I called Vanessa again. This time, she answered. "Graham, I don't have time for... Turn on the news." I heard her stop. There was the sound of a television coming on in a room that had been quiet. Then nothing for several seconds. Then her breathing changed. "What is that?" she said. Not a question, a wall going up. "Vanessa, listen to me. I need you and Chloe to drive to the property. Right now. I know you don't want to hear this from me. I know what it sounds like. But the broadcast is federal, it's real, and I have room for both of you. For all of us. Chloe's at Megan's house. She slept over." My stomach dropped. Megan Tierney, Bridgeton, 38 minutes from Vanessa's apartment in Creve Coeur, 51 from the property in the opposite direction. The math started running in my head, the math I'd been doing for 6 years on paper. Running evacuation routes. Timing highway access against population density and projected panic curves. Bridgeton was close to the airport, close to density, close to everything I'd built the bunker to be far from. Can you get her? I just woke up, Graham. I'm looking at what is happening in Atlanta. It's not just Atlanta. Please listen. Get Chloe, drive to the property. I'll leave the gate open and the outer door unsealed until 4 o'clock this afternoon. After that, I have to close it. You have to close it? You're giving me a deadline. The situation is giving you a deadline. I'm telling you what it is. You sound exactly like you've always sounded. You know that? Like every nightmare you've been hoping for is finally here, and you want to thank you. She hung up. I stood there in the bunker holding my phone. And the thing I felt was not anger and not even fear. It was recognition. Because she was right again. Some part of me, some part I couldn't cut out with a scalpel, had felt a dark, shameful thrill when the broadcast started. A vindication so deep it was almost physical. And Vanessa had heard it in 4 sentences. The bunker is 2,200 square feet. 2 bedrooms, a central living area, a kitchen module with a 6-burner propane range and 280 gallons of freeze-dried stores, a composting toilet system I was genuinely proud of, a medical bay the size of a walk-in closet, and a communications alcove with ham, shortwave, and a CB setup. I'd wired it for Ethernet on the off-chance terrestrial internet survived longer than cellular. It hadn't. Cell service dropped completely at 11:40 a.m. on October 11th. Internet held until early afternoon, then went to sporadic, then ghost. By 9 that morning, I'd heard enough on shortwave to understand the scope. It wasn't regional. The word they were not yet using on any official channel was the word I'd been building against for 6 years, the word that had cost me my marriage and most of my friendships and all of my savings. The dead were not staying dead. Something in the bites or in the air near the bites or in the water, no one was consistent, was restarting motor function in tissue that had ceased. The restarted bodies were violent, insensate, and spreading the condition with a ferocity that outpaced every containment line established in the first 12 hours. I moved through the bunker checking systems. Water pressure, stable. Air quality, nominal. Battery bank, 96%. Propane reserve, 14 months at projected usage for 4 people. I'd built this place for 4 people. Me, Vanessa, Owen, Chloe. 4 bunks, 4 place settings, 4 toothbrush holders in the bathroom module, installed during a weekend when I still believed we'd all be here together. That the emergency would arrive and the family would reconvene around the fact that I had been right. That was the fantasy. Not the zombies, not the collapse, the reunion. The moment when being prepared stopped being a punchline and became the reason they came home. By noon, Owen hadn't arrived. Vanessa hadn't called back. Chloe was somewhere in Bridgeton in a house I'd never been to. I opened the outer door and walked up to ground level. The Ozarks were quiet. October's sun through the cedars. A hawk circling something I couldn't see. No sirens, no traffic noise. The highway was 4 miles north and I couldn't hear it, which meant either nothing was moving or everything had already moved past. At 1:15 p.m., I heard an engine on the gravel road. Not Owen's Honda, a truck, big diesel. It came around the bend too fast, throwing rock, and stopped 40 feet from the shed with the engine still running. The driver's door opened, and a man I didn't know got out holding a shotgun in one hand and a gas can in the other. He was maybe 30, unshaved, eyes moving too fast. Blood on his left boot, not a lot, but enough to see against the tan leather. "This your land?" he called. "It is." "You got water?" "I do." "I got gas, 12 gallons. I'll trade for water and passage south." I looked at him, standing in my driveway with a gun he hadn't pointed at me yet. And I thought about every scenario I'd planned for, every variable I'd gamed. I'd spent 6 years preparing for the collapse of civilization. I had not spent 1 minute preparing for the possibility that when it came, I'd be standing here alone. His name was Curtis. He didn't give a last name, and I didn't ask. I filled 2 jugs from the surface spigot, not the bunker supply, never the bunker supply. And he leaned the shotgun against his truck while he drank. That told me something. Either he trusted me, or he was too exhausted to maintain threat posture. Neither one made him safe. "Where are you coming from?" I asked. "Sullivan, hour west." He wiped his mouth. "It's gone, whole town. The Walmart was the last place people gathered, and it went sideways around dawn. I saw—" He stopped, looked at the gas can like it was a more comfortable subject. "I saw enough. Sullivan was 46 miles from my property. I'd marked it on my planning maps as a secondary concern, small population, low density, likely to empty before it imploded. I'd been wrong, or the math had changed. The math was always changing now. "I'm waiting for my family," I said. "My son's driving from Columbia. My daughter and ex-wife are in St. Louis County." Curtis looked at me with an expression I couldn't read. "St. Louis County," he repeated. "Yeah. Mister, I came through the edge of Franklin County an hour ago, and the interchange at 44 and 100 was burning. Not metaphor burning. Fire. They'd set roadblocks and people were ramming them and the whole thing caught. St. Louis County is east of that." I felt the information land in my chest, like a stone in still water, the impact, then the slow radiating rings. Chloe, Vanessa, east of a burning interchange. Every mile between them and me suddenly weighted differently. "My son's coming from the other direction," I said, because saying it out loud made it feel like something I could still control. "Good luck." Curtis capped the jug. "I appreciate the water. I'm heading south, like I said. If your family shows up, you're lucky. If they don't—" He stopped himself, shook his head. "Sorry, I've been driving since 4 a.m. and I've got no filter left." He took the gas can back to his truck. I let him go. 12 gallons of diesel I could have used, a shotgun I could have tried to trade for, a pair of hands that could have helped me fortify the surface entrance. I let all of it drive south because I didn't want another man in my bunker. I wanted my family. I wanted the 4 toothbrush holders to mean what they were supposed to mean. At 2:50 p.m., Owen's Honda appeared on the gravel road. He was driving the speed limit, which was so perfectly Owen that I nearly laughed. He parked beside the shed, got out carrying a backpack and a dorm room comforter bunched under one arm, and looked at me with an expression I recognized from 100 arguments about the bunker, about the money, about the divorce. An expression that said, "I am here, but I need you to know I think this is insane." "Hey, Dad." "Hey, I saw some messed up stuff on I-70. "I know." There was a something on the shoulder near Kingdom City. A car flipped and people were on the ground, but they were still moving. Wrong kind of moving. He swallowed. I drove past. I didn't stop. "That's right. You don't stop." He looked at the shed, at the ground. He knew the entrance was underneath, but he'd only been down twice. Both times under protest, both times leaving early. "Is Mom coming?" I called her. She said she'd try. That was a lie. She hadn't said she'd try. She'd said I sounded like every nightmare I'd been hoping for had arrived. But Owen needed a version he could carry into the ground. "Chloe? She's with your mom." Another lie. Chloe was at Megan's house in Bridgeton, which was east of a burning interchange. And I didn't know if Vanessa had picked her up yet. I didn't know anything. I had the most prepared bunker in the county, and I didn't know where my daughter was. "Let's go inside," I said. Owen followed me down. I sealed the outer door. I did not seal the blast door, not yet. That was the 4 o'clock deadline I'd given Vanessa. And I meant it. Because the blast door was rated for 7,000 pounds of force, and once it closed, the hydraulic cycle took 11 minutes to reverse. 11 minutes was a lifetime now. We went down. Owen stood in the main room looking at the supplies, the bunks, the comm station, the water filtration display, the hand-labeled bins of medical supplies and batteries and ammunition. He stood there like a man visiting a cathedral built by a father he doesn't understand, recognizing for the first time that the madness had architecture. "You really did all this," he said. "Yeah. It works." "Yeah." He put his comforter on the top bunk in the room I designated as his and Chloe's. He didn't ask whose was the bottom bunk. He didn't need to. 3:40 p.m. I was topside, standing in the tree line where I could see the gravel roads approach for a quarter mile. Owen was below, monitoring the shortwave, which was still carrying fragmented broadcasts from Jefferson City and a repeating loop from FEMA that hadn't updated in 2 hours. I had my phone in my hand, even though cellular had been dead since before noon. Muscle memory, the phantom limb of connection. The afternoon light had a strange quality, golden, undisturbed, indifferent. I could hear birds. A woodpecker somewhere east, working a dead oak with that mechanical patience that used to annoy me when I was up here pouring concrete footers. Now it sounded like the last normal thing on Earth. At 3:52, I heard a second engine, smaller than Curtis's diesel. It came slower, almost hesitant, and I stepped out of the tree line to see Vanessa's Subaru nosing around the bend with the headlights on in broad daylight. The passenger seat was empty. The car stopped. Vanessa got out. She was wearing the gray cardigan she wore around the apartment, the one she'd had since before we married. Her face was the color of old paper. She walked toward me without speaking, and I saw that her hands were trembling. "Where's Chloe?" I said. Vanessa looked at me. The trembling climbed from her hands to her jaw. "I couldn't get to Bridgeton. The roads, Graham. The roads there are people on the highway, but they're not They're walking, but they're not people anymore. I saw a woman in a Schnucks uniform try to pull a man out of his car through the window, and she tore his shit. Vanessa, where is Chloe? I couldn't get to her. The scream came from somewhere below her composure. From the basement of a person who had driven 30 miles of unimaginable road to arrive in the driveway of a man she'd divorced. I tried the 270 bypass and the 70 interchange and the Dorset exit, and every single one of them was either blocked or occupied. I turned around. I came here without her. The sentence landed in the air between us, and I watched it settle. Megan's parents, I said. Do they have a... Megan's dad is a dentist, Graham. He has a 3-bedroom ranch in Bridgeton. He does not have a bunker. I deserved that. I stood in it. We'll get her, I said. How? I didn't answer because I didn't know. The interchange at 44 was burning. The highways into Metro St. Louis were compromised. Bridgeton was 38 miles northeast through terrain that was rapidly filling with things that used to be people. My bunker could sustain 4 adults for 14 months. It could not reach across 38 miles of collapsing infrastructure and bring my daughter home. It's almost 4, I said. I need to seal the blast door. Then seal it. You should come inside. She looked at the shed entrance, at the ground where the bunker lay underneath, at the property she'd argued against buying, at the structure she'd called my concrete midlife crisis, in front of our couple's therapist. Then she looked at me with an expression that was not gratitude and not surrender, but something raw. The face of a person accepting help from the last source they would have chosen. I need to get my bag from the car. She got her bag. A single duffel. I didn't ask what was in it. We went down. Owen was at the comm station, and he stood up when he saw his mother and crossed the room and held her. And she held him. And I sealed the blast door at 4:07 p.m. With 3 of the 4 toothbrush holders accounted for, and the 4th one, empty and clean, in a bathroom my daughter had never seen. The hydraulic seal engaged. The bolts cycled. The sound was deep, tonal, final. I'd heard it 200 times during testing. It had never sounded like this. It sounded like a period at the end of a sentence I couldn't take back. The first night was organizational. Vanessa chose the bedroom I'd built for us, the one with the full-size mattress and the reading lights I'd wired on separate switches because she liked to read later than I did. A detail from a marriage that had ended 2 years ago installed an infrastructure that might outlast us both. She didn't comment on the reading lights. She closed the door. Owen stayed up with me. We inventoried. I walked him through the systems, water, air, power, comms, waste, and he listened with an attention I'd never seen from him before. Not the attention of a believer. The attention of a person who has just learned that the crazy thing is the only thing standing between him and the dark. How long can we stay down here? He asked. 14 months at 4 people, longer at 3. He caught the math, looked at me, didn't say it. We're going to get her, I said. How? Same question Vanessa had asked. Same absence of an answer. I showed him the comm setup instead. The ham was pulling in transmissions from as far as Tulsa to the southwest and Louisville to the east. Most were fragments. Some were organized military frequencies, automated, looping. A few were civilian, raw, desperate. A woman in Rolla reading a list of names into a CB channel, asking if anyone had seen them. A man in Springfield describing the barricade his neighborhood had built and asking for ammunition. A teenager somewhere south of here, signal weak, saying, "Please," over and over into dead air. Owen listened. His face did something I hadn't seen before, a kind of compression, as if the sounds were physically pressing against the inside of his skull. He reached over and turned the volume down. "Can we transmit?" he asked. "Yes." "Can we reach Bridgeton?" "Not directly. Ham doesn't work like a phone. But if someone with a relay setup is between here and there, we could bounce a message." "Then let's try." We spent 2 hours calling. I used the handle I'd registered in 2020, Bravo Golf 7, and transmitted on every civilian frequency I could reach, looking for anyone in Bridgeton, Missouri. Looking for a 16-year-old girl named Chloe Breck. Brown hair, 5'6", staying at the Tierney residence on Ladue Manor Lane. If anyone can hear this, please respond. Nobody responded. At midnight, Owen went to bed. I stayed at the comm station. The woman in Rolla was still reading her list. The teenager had stopped saying please. The silence on the Bridgeton frequency was absolute. I sat in a bunker that had cost me my marriage, my savings, my reputation, and most of my relationships. And I listened to it work exactly as designed: air circulating, water clean, batteries full, walls holding. And I felt the vindication curdle into something I didn't have a name for. The bunker had saved my life. It was saving Owen's life. It was saving Vanessa's life. It was doing everything I'd built it to do. And my daughter was 38 miles away in a house with no basement, no supplies, and no father. Because her father had been down here, building walls instead of building something she could reach. I'd spent $500,000 preparing for the end of the world. I had not spent one evening preparing for the possibility that when it ended, I would be the wrong kind of ready. Day 2. Vanessa didn't come out of her room until noon. When she did, she went straight to the kitchen module, made coffee from the vacuum-sealed supply I'd stored in 2022, and sat at the table without looking at either of us. Owen and I had been on the comms since 6 a.m. We'd made contact with a relay operator outside Rolla who called himself Lineman, and who had a signal map that included parts of St. Louis County. He hadn't heard anything from Bridgeton specifically, but he'd picked up a cluster of transmissions from the Hazelwood area, 3 miles south of Bridgeton, describing a community shelter at a church. Survivors gathering, some organization, some armed defense. Could she be there? Owen asked me. She could be anywhere. That's not helpful, Dad. I know. Vanessa spoke from the table without turning around. Megan's mother is practical. If the house wasn't safe, she'd move. A church shelter 3 miles away is exactly where Carol Tierney would go. It was the most she'd said since arriving. Owen and I both looked at her. She was holding her coffee with both hands, staring at the wall where I'd mounted a topographic map of the surrounding 50-mile radius. I'd marked it with evac routes, water sources, resupply points, color-coded, laminated. It looked like the work of a man who had thought of everything. Vanessa stood up and walked to the map. She put her finger on Bridgeton. Then she traced the distance from Bridgeton to us. Her finger moved slowly across the laminated surface, crossing rivers, highways, the shaded areas I'd marked as high-density risk zones. The distance was physical, visible, measured. 38 miles of terrain that was no longer traversable by normal means. "You planned for everything," she said, her finger still on the map. "I tried. You have routes for going out to get supplies. Resupply points. You have a route to Rolla, and a route to Springfield, and a route to the Lake of the Ozarks." She turned to look at me. "Did you ever plan a route to Bridgeton?" I hadn't. Bridgeton was a suburb on the wrong side of the metropolitan area. It wasn't on any of my maps, because it had never been part of my scenario. My scenario was the family coming here. Together. In time. The bunker as destination, not staging point. I'd built an ark and assumed everyone would walk to the gangplank. No, I said. Vanessa nodded, not surprised, not angry exactly. Something flatter and more permanent. You built all of this to save your family, she said. But you built it in the wrong direction. She went back to her room. Owen looked at me across the comm station. He was 19. He had his mother's eyes and my jaw, and an expression that was trying very hard not to choose sides. She's scared, Dad. I know. She's not wrong, though. I knew that too, at day 4. I went topside for the first time since sealing the door. The surface protocol I designed was specific. 30-minute maximum exposure, armed. Radio contact with the bunker at 10-minute intervals. I carried a Mossberg 590 I'd purchased in 2021 and a pair of binoculars and a handheld radio tuned to the channel Owen was monitoring below. The blast door's 11-minute cycle meant that if something went wrong topside, I had to survive at least that long before anyone could open or close the entrance behind me. The Ozarks hadn't changed. That was the uncanny thing. The cedars, the limestone bluffs, the gravel road winding north through the property's 40 acres. A deer stood in the east meadow chewing something, ears rotating, alive and unbothered. The sky was pale blue with high cirrus clouds. The air smelled like fall leaf rot and cooling soil, and that particular Ozark mineral sharpness that comes off the exposed rock in the evening. I walked to the north perimeter where the tree line met the gravel road. Knelt. Listened. The highway was 4 miles away, and the sound that reached me was not traffic. It was a low, irregular thumping, like a drummer with no rhythm, hitting the same note at random intervals. I couldn't identify it. I didn't want to. Through the binoculars, I scanned the road as far as I could see. Nothing moving, no vehicles, no people. But at the edge of my vision, where the road curved west and dropped toward the creek crossing, I saw something on the gravel that didn't belong. A shoe. Just one. A woman's sneaker, white, sitting upright in the middle of the road, as if someone had stepped out of it mid-stride. I didn't investigate. I went back to the shed and radioed Owen, and went below and sealed the door. Protocol followed. Nothing compromised. Clean run. But the shoe stayed in my head. It stayed because it was proof that the distance between the bunker and the dying world was 4 miles and shrinking. And because a shoe without a person tells a story, I didn't need to narrate to understand. That evening, I spread the topographic map on the table and began planning what I should have planned 6 years ago. A route from the property to Bridgeton, Missouri, 38 miles, through Franklin County, through the suburban outskirts of West County, across the Missouri River if the bridges were passable, around them if they weren't. I marked water sources, gas stations, potential shelter points, places where the road narrowed and ambush was possible, places where the road widened and visibility gave an advantage. I did this with the same precision I'd brought to every other element of the bunker's design. And I did it knowing that a route on paper means nothing if you don't have the will to walk it. Owen sat down across from me while I worked. He watched for a while. Then he said, "You're going to go get her." "Yes." "When?" "When I have a route that gives me a realistic chance." "What's a realistic chance?" I looked at him. He was asking a real question, not challenging calculating. His mother's practicality emerging under pressure. The same way Vanessa could look at a household budget and see the exact line where optimism became fantasy. "Better than even," I said. "You're one person, on foot or in a vehicle that might not make it past the first blocked interchange. Through 38 miles of whatever's out there now. That's not better than even, Dad. That's not even close. I know. So, what are you actually planning? I put down the marker. I'm planning to go anyway. I'm planning to leave in 48 hours. I'm planning to take the truck to the county line and go on foot from there. I'm planning to reach Bridgeton or the church shelter in Hazelwood and find her and bring her back. And I'm planning to leave you and your mother sealed in a bunker with 14 months of supplies so that if I don't come back, you survive. Owen's face didn't change. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said the thing I'd spent 6 years trying not to hear from anyone. That's not a plan, Dad. That's a gesture. He was right. Owen was right the way Vanessa had been right. The way Curtis had been right to keep driving south. The way every person who'd ever looked at me with that recalibrating expression had been right. I was a man who built things. Concrete, rebar, plumbing, electrical, I built systems. But the bunker hadn't been a system. It had been a monument to a feeling I couldn't express any other way. A man who can't say, "I'm terrified of losing you," builds a $500,000 hole in the ground and calls it love. And now the monument was perfect and the family was incomplete. And the impulse to fix it was the same impulse that had broken it, the conviction that if I just built the right thing, did the right amount of work, spent the right amount of money, the distance between me and the people I loved would finally close. I didn't go in 48 hours. I didn't go because on day 5, the radio changed. Lineman, the relay operator outside Rolla, patched through a signal that had bounced from somewhere in West St. Louis County. A woman's voice, distorted but coherent. She identified herself as Dr. Patricia Osei, an OB-GYN operating out of a veterinary clinic on Manchester Road that had been converted into a field hospital. She had 31 survivors, limited medical supplies, and a functioning generator. She also had a list of nearby shelters she'd been in contact with. And one of them was the church in Hazelwood. I was on the microphone in seconds. Bravo Golf 7 to the Manchester Road station. Do you have a current roster for the Hazelwood church shelter? I'm looking for a 16-year-old girl, Chloe Breck, or the Tierney family. Please respond. Static. Then Dr. Osei's voice, tired and precise. I don't have a roster. I have secondhand reports. The church shelter had approximately 120 occupants as of 2 days ago. They've gone dark on radio since yesterday morning. I don't know why. Gone dark meaning no transmission? Meaning no transmission and no response to hails. Could be equipment failure. Could be they moved. Could be worse. I'm sorry I don't have more. I thanked her. Owen was standing behind me, and Vanessa was standing in the bedroom doorway. All 3 of us had heard it. 120 people in a church that had stopped talking. Vanessa came to the table. She sat down across from me, looked at the map with my hand-drawn route to Bridgeton, and said, "Don't go." I looked at her. "Graham, listen to me. Don't go. You will die on that road, and Chloe will not be in that church, and Owen and I will sit down here and wait for you until the food runs out. That is what will happen. You don't know that. I know you. I know what you do. You build things. You plan things. You spend enormous energy constructing a perfect structure, and then you are shocked every time when the people inside it don't feel what you expected them to feel. The bunker is safe. We are alive. That is real. Going out there on a redemption trip disguised as a rescue is the same thing you've always done. It's building another bunker. A bigger, more dramatic bunker. Instead of sitting in this one and being a father to the son who is actually here. Owen was standing against the far wall. He said nothing. His face was unreadable. She's my daughter, I said. She's my daughter too. You think I don't want to claw through 38 miles of the dead to reach her? You think I came here because I wanted to? I came here because I can't get to her, and I would rather be alive in your concrete monument than dead on Dorset Road. But I'm not going to pretend that going out there is rational. It is not rational. It is the same obsession that built this place, pointed in a new direction. She held my gaze. I wanted to argue. I wanted to say she was wrong, that this was different, that the bunker was proof of foresight and the rescue was proof of love. And they were not the same thing. But they were the same thing. They were exactly the same thing. A man who cannot tolerate the possibility of losing control, building and building and building against the dark. I didn't go. I didn't go that day, or the next, or the next. Day 9. The shortwave bands were thinning, fewer voices, wider gaps. Linemen still broadcasted from Rolla every morning and evening, but his signal list was shrinking. Dr. Osei had gone intermittent. Her generator was failing, she said, and she was rationing fuel for medical equipment over communications. The Hazelwood church was still dark. Inside the bunker, something had shifted. Not dramatically, not with a fight or a revelation. Just a slow, grinding reorientation, like a compass needle settling after being knocked. Owen and I maintained the systems he'd learned, the air handling cycle and the water pressure monitoring, and took pride in doing both correctly. Vanessa organized the food stores, calculated caloric budgets, and posted a rotation schedule on the kitchen wall with a dry erase marker she'd found in my supply bins. She did not thank me for the supplies. She did not acknowledge the bunker's adequacy. She simply used it, the way you use a tool without praising the person who bought it. I understood. The bunker was a sore subject the way a surgeon's knife is a sore subject when you're lying on the table, effective, necessary, and impossible to appreciate from the position it put you in. But on the 9th night, something happened that broke the pattern. I was at the comm station at 2 a.m. I'd been sleeping in 3-hour intervals, spending the rest monitoring frequencies, when a signal came in on a channel I'd almost stopped checking. CB Channel 19, the old trucker frequency. A voice, young, female, distorted by distance and interference, but unmistakable in timbre, if not in clarity. Anyone hear me? This is Chloe Breck. I'm at the Hazelwood Covenant Church in Hazelwood, Missouri. There are 60-something people here. We lost our generator and we're using a truck battery for the radio. If my dad can hear this, Dad, if you can hear this, we're okay. We're okay, but we can't stay. The building it's not holding. We're going to try to move south in the morning. I don't know where. Someone said there's a military checkpoint on 44 west of Eureka. We're going to try for that. I love you. If you hear this, I'm alive. The transmission ended. Static filled the channel. I sat there with my hands on the desk, and I felt every wall I'd built concrete, emotional, philosophical shake at once. Not crack, not collapse. Shake. The way a structure shakes when the ground beneath it remembers it can move. I played it back. I'd set the comms to record on a loop. I played it back 3 times. Then I went to Owen's room and woke him. Fendel Marbaum. And I went to Vanessa's room and knocked until she opened the door. And I played it for both of them, standing in the main room at 2:23 in the morning in a bunker under the Ozarks. Vanessa's hand went to her mouth. Owen sat down on the floor. The recording played Chloe's voice into the concrete room. And for 8 seconds, the bunker was what I'd always wanted it to be. A place where my family was together, hearing the same thing, feeling the same thing, needing the same thing. Then the recording ended, and Vanessa said, "She's moving south, toward 44. Toward the Eureka checkpoint, I said. That's west of the metro. That's Vanessa. That's closer. That's significantly closer. She looked at the map. Her finger traced the path from Hazelwood south to the I-44 corridor. Then it traced the path from our bunker northeast to the same corridor. The two lines converged in Franklin County, in the same area Curtis had described as burning 5 days earlier. It's still 30 miles, she said. It's 30 miles on roads I know. I grew up in Eureka. I built houses in Pacific. I know every back road between here and there. Owen stood up from the floor. I'm going with you. No. Dad, no. If I don't come back, your mother needs you here. The bunker needs someone who knows the systems. The bunker will run itself for a month, without anyone touching a panel, and you know it. You designed it that way. I'm going. I looked at Vanessa. She was looking at Owen. Her face was doing the thing it did when she was calculating not the emotional math, the real math. 2 people on the road doubled the risk, but also doubled the capability. 2 people could drive in shifts, watch in shifts, carry in shifts. And the hard, unsentimentalized truth was that Owen was 19, strong, fast, and a better runner than I would ever be again. Both of you come back, she said. It wasn't permission. It wasn't blessing. It was a statement of terms from a woman who had already lost too much to the gap between what I built and who I was. We left at first light on day 10. I'd spent the remaining hours of the night prepping the truck, a 2018 F-25 I kept on the property with a full tank and a bed-mounted toolbox. I loaded water, food for 4 days, a medical kit, the Mossberg, a Ruger 1022 for Owen, 2 handheld radios, a siphon kit, and the folded topographic map with 2 routes marked in red. Primary, south on county roads to Highway 100, east to the Pacific Interchange, north into the 44 corridor toward Eureka. Secondary, if 100 was blocked, a series of farm roads through the Franklin County hollows that would add 20 miles but avoid choke points. Vanessa walked us to the surface. She stood in the October morning light and looked at the truck and then at Owen and then at me. She did not hug Owen. She held his face in both hands and looked at him and said, "You stay with him and you stay smart." Then she turned to me. "Graham." "Yeah. Don't build anything. Just bring her home." I understood what she meant. Don't plan, don't engineer. Don't construct a rescue that satisfies my need for control. Go, find the girl. Come back. We drove north to the county road and turned east. The first mile was empty. The second mile had an overturned sedan in the ditch with both doors open and blood dried. Brown, days old, smeared across the driver's headrest. No bodies. Owen looked at it and then looked forward and didn't speak. By the third mile, we'd reached the edge of what I thought of as the populated band, where the rural Ozarks gave way to the more densely settled Franklin County corridor. Houses appeared, first scattered, then clustered. All dark, some with doors open, one with a garden hose still running, snaking across a driveway into the road, water pooling in a pothole that reflected the sky like a dirty mirror. At mile 7, we saw our first infected. She was standing in a front yard beside an overturned big-wheel tricycle. Middle-aged, heavy-set, wearing a house coat that had been white. Her left arm hung at an angle that suggested the shoulder was dislocated or the muscle controlling it had stopped working. She wasn't moving, just standing, facing approximately north, swaying slightly like a person falling asleep on their feet. Her mouth was open and I could see, even at 40 yards and highway speed, that the inside of it was dark with something that wasn't shadow. Owen inhaled sharply. "Don't slow down," he said. I didn't slow down. She didn't react to the truck. We passed her, and I watched in the mirror as she stayed exactly where she was, swaying, mouth open, standing beside a child's toy in a yard where the grass was still mowed. The next 3 miles produced 6 more. 2 on the road itself. We swerved around them at speed, and they turned their heads, tracking the engine noise, but didn't pursue. 1 in a gas station parking lot, sitting on the ground with its back against a fuel pump, legs extended, head tilted up, as if watching the sky for something. 3 in a cluster at a church parking lot, standing in a loose triangle, motionless, facing each other like a conversation that had ended, and no one had walked away. Owen was gripping the Ruger with both hands. His knuckles were pale. Why aren't they chasing us? I don't know. The broadcasts said they were aggressive, attacking people. These are just standing. Maybe they've fed. Maybe there's no stimulus close enough. I don't know, Owen. That one's looking at us. I checked the mirror. One of the church parking lot cluster had turned fully toward the road. Not pursuing, not approaching, just oriented in our direction the way a satellite dish orients toward a signal. Passive reception. That was somehow worse than pursuit. Pursuit I could outrun. Attention I could not outbuild. We hit our first real obstacle at mile 14. Highway 100 was passable, but barely abandoned vehicles formed a staggered maze that required dropping to walking speed and threading the truck through gaps that sometimes cleared the mirrors by inches. Owen got out twice to guide me through, standing in the open with the Ruger, scanning the tree line, his voice steady on the handheld. 2 feet left. Hold, hold. Okay, come ahead. He was good at it. That surprised me, and then shamed me for being surprised. Owen had spent 19 years watching me build things, and I'd never once considered that he might have absorbed the spatial awareness, the patience, the instinct for clearance and angle. I'd assumed the only thing he'd absorbed was resentment. At mile 19, we reached the Pacific Interchange and found what Curtis had described as burning. It had burned. The overpass was intact, but the road surface beneath it was a charred moonscape of melted asphalt and vehicle husks, still warm enough that heat distortion rippled above the median. We couldn't cross it. The secondary route through the hollows was the only option. I pulled the map and rerouted. Owen studied it without comment, and we turned south on a farm road that wound through the kind of terrain I'd built houses on for 20 years. Limestone cuts, seasonal creek beds, gravel switchbacks through second-growth timber. Familiar ground. My ground. The hollows were quiet. Not just empty quiet, muffled, insulated, as if the landscape itself had pulled a blanket over its head. We passed a farmstead with goats still in their pen, alive, bleeding at the truck. We passed a mobile home with a bedsheet spray-painted, "Alive inside, do not enter," hanging from the porch rail. We passed a hand-lettered sign nailed to a fence post that read, "Bridge out 2 miles." And sure enough, 2 miles later, the creek crossing was a 6-foot gap of missing timber and rushing brown water. Owen looked at the gap. Can we ford downstream? I got out and walked the bank. 100 yards south, the creek widened and shallowed over a gravel bed. I could see bottom, maybe 18 inches deep, maybe 24. The F250 could handle it if the gravel was solid and the current wasn't hiding a washout. I think so. You think so? I've built drainage systems on terrain like this for 20 years. The gravel's compacted. Current's not cutting a new channel. I think the truck makes it. Owen looked at me. I waited for the challenge. Instead, he said, "Then let's go." We forded the creek. The water came up to the running boards, and the tires slipped once on a mossy stone, but held. On the far side, the road climbed through an oak stand and reconnected with a county blacktop that ran northeast toward the I-44 corridor. At mile 26, we crested a ridge and saw, spread below us in the valley, the remains of what had been the Eureka commercial strip. Fast food restaurants, car dealerships, strip malls, all dark, all still, most with shattered glass. And moving among them, visible from our elevated position, a scattered population of infected that numbered in the low hundreds. Not clustered, not hunting. Distributed, like a crowd after an event, some standing, some sitting, some walking in slow, purposeless arcs. A town-sized organism with no purpose and no self-awareness, filling the streets of a place that had once been defined by its commerce. Owen looked through the binoculars. The 44 on-ramp is past the dealership row, quarter-mile through that. Through that meant through them, past them, among them. They didn't chase the truck before, he said. They weren't this dense before. We sat on the ridge for 10 minutes, watching. The infected moved in patterns that might have been random or might have been residual. One. Walked the same 50-yard stretch of sidewalk repeatedly, turning at the same point each time, as if pacing a room only she could see. Another stood in the drive-through lane of a Taco Bell, facing the menu board, swaying. We go at speed, I said. Windows up. Don't stop for anything. I know, Dad. I looked at him. He looked at me. And something happened in that cab, not a reconciliation, not an understanding, but a recognition. He was here, in the truck, on this road, with me. Not because the bunker had pulled him in, but because he had chosen to leave it. He'd chosen my company on the worst drive of our lives. And that was a kind of answer to a question I'd been asking with concrete and rebar for 6 years. Let's go, he said. We descended into Eureka at 50 miles per hour, and I kept the accelerator steady. The engine noise rolled through the valley like a summons. Heads turned, bodies oriented. The passive satellite dish attention I'd seen earlier activated into something more directed. Not pursuit, not yet, but a convergence of orientation that felt like the first inhale before a scream. 3 blocks in, one stepped into the road directly ahead. A man in a FedEx uniform, face swollen and discolored, one eye open and one socket empty. He didn't dodge. He didn't raise his arms. He stood in the lane like a traffic cone, and I hit him at 50, and the impact was... It was a sound I will carry. Not a crash, not a thud, something between. The truck shuddered, and he went under, and the rear tires jolted, and Owen grabbed the dash and said nothing. I kept driving. The on-ramp was visible now. Half a mile. The infected were converging from side streets, not running, not walking, something between. A shuffling urgency, like people hurrying through an airport, late but not panicked. Dozens of them. The sound of the engine was pulling them in from blocks I couldn't see. Owen was watching the side mirror. More behind us, a lot more. I see the ramp. There's a bus on the ramp. A school bus, jackknifed across the on-ramp at a 40-degree angle, blocking the right lane entirely and most of the left. The gap between the bus's front bumper and the concrete barrier was maybe 4 feet. The truck was 6.5 feet wide. We won't fit, Owen said. I didn't slow down. I angled the truck toward the gap and calculated not the way an engineer calculates, with margins and tolerances, but the way a desperate man calculates, with hope substituted for clearance. The right mirror sheared off against the bus. The left quarter panel scraped the barrier with a sound like tearing sheet metal. The truck decelerated hard as friction ate the momentum. And for one frozen second, I thought we were wedged stuck between the bus and the wall, with 100 infected converging behind us in a corridor with no reverse. Then the rear tires caught clean asphalt beyond the barrier, and the truck lurched forward, and we were through and on the interstate. And I pushed the accelerator to the floor, and the infected behind us shrank in the remaining mirror to shapes, then dots, then nothing. Owen exhaled. His hands were shaking. He put the Ruger on the floor and pressed his palms flat against his thighs and breathed. 4 feet, he said. It was more like 3. Dad, that was insane. Yes. We made it, though. Yes. He almost smiled. I almost did, too. Then the road ahead came into focus and the smile died because the interstate wasn't empty. It was a parking lot. Hundreds of vehicles, stopped in both directions, doors open, a frozen exodus with no one left to complete it. And walking among them, slow and purposeless and everywhere, were the people who hadn't made it to wherever they were going. We couldn't drive through this, not at speed, not safely. The vehicles were too dense, the gaps too narrow, the infected too numerous. I pulled the truck to the shoulder and stopped. We walk from here, I said. Owen looked at the landscape of stopped cars and moving dead and said, How far? 8 miles to the Eureka checkpoint if it exists. If. Chloe said someone told her about it. That's all we have. He picked up the Ruger from the floor, checked the magazine, worked the bolt. His hands had stopped shaking. Okay, he said. Let's walk. Walking through the stalled interstate was like moving through a museum exhibit about the last day of ordinary life. A minivan with a DVD player still running on battery, a frozen frame of a Pixar movie glowing in the back seat. A sedan with an open trunk full of neatly packed suitcases, each tagged with a luggage label that read, Florida. A motorcycle on its side with the rider's helmet still attached to the handlebars by its chin strap, swinging gently in the wind. We moved quietly. Not silently, perfect silence was impossible on asphalt, littered with glass and debris, but with the practiced restraint of people who understood that sound was currency, and they were spending it with every step. The infected on the highway were sparse but present. Most stood beside or inside vehicles, facing random directions, exhibiting that same swaying passivity. A few tracked us with their heads as we passed. None approached, but their attention had a quality, an accumulation that felt like static charge building before a spark. Owen walked 3 paces behind me and slightly left, covering the gaps between cars I couldn't see around. We'd developed a vocabulary of hand signals without discussing it: palm up for stop, finger pointed for look, fist closed for threat. He picked it up instantly, the way he'd picked up the truck guiding, the way he'd picked up the water pressure monitoring. Owen learned by watching. He'd been watching me his whole life, and I hadn't noticed, because I was too busy building things to look back. At mile 3 we found the checkpoint, or what had been the checkpoint. A military barricade stretched across both lanes of the interstate at what had been the Eureka exit. Jersey barriers, concertina wire, 2 Humvees parked nose to nose. A sandbag position with a mounted weapon system that had been fired, brass casings everywhere, rolling underfoot like lethal marbles. Behind the barricade, a cluster of canvas tents, a field kitchen, portable latrines. A military camp built for 300, maybe 400 people. It was empty, not destroyed empty. The tents were still standing. The kitchen equipment was still in place. MRE boxes stacked neatly against a Humvee's rear quarter. But no soldiers, no civilians, no bodies. Just the camp, the wire, and the wind moving through the canvas. Owen swept the perimeter while I checked the tents. Cots, personal belongings, a clipboard on a folding table in the command tent, with a handwritten manifest listing incoming civilian groups by date, time, and number. I scanned it with the desperation of a man reading a phone book for one name. October 12th. 43 civilians from Baldwin. October 12th. 17 from Chesterfield. October 13th. 86 from Hazelwood area, including church group. My fingers stopped. October 13th. 86 from Hazelwood, church group. Owen, come here. He came, read the entry, looked at me. That could be her group. It's the right area, the right timing, the right description. But they're not here. Nobody's here. I read further down the manifest. October 14th. Relocated to FOB Waynesville per regional command. All civilian groups transported via convoy. Then a final entry, hastily written. Comms lost with RC 0600 October 15th. No further orders. Garrison dissolved per CO discretion. The military had been here. They'd received civilians, including possibly a church group from Hazelwood that might have included my daughter. They'd moved those civilians south to a forward operating base in Waynesville. And then the chain of command had gone silent, and the soldiers had left. Waynesville was 70 miles southwest, 70 miles deeper into the Ozarks, 70 miles further from the bunker, further from Vanessa, further from everything I'd built. But it was a military installation. Fort Leonard Wood was adjacent. And if any infrastructure had survived the first 2 weeks, it would be there. 70 miles, Owen said. I know. On foot? We find a vehicle, something in the camp, or something on the highway we can get running. And Mom? She's in the bunker waiting for us to come back with Chloe. We're already a day past what we told her. He was right. Vanessa was below ground, monitoring the radio, counting hours. Every hour we didn't return was a new geometry of grief she had to manage alone. Going to Waynesville added days, maybe more. And the bunker's radio couldn't reach us at 70 miles. We'd be beyond contact, beyond reassurance, beyond the perimeter of the system I'd designed. I stood in the empty checkpoint, holding a clipboard with my daughter's possible name hidden inside a number. And I felt the old machinery start to turn. The planning machinery, the building machinery, the engine that had driven me to spend $500,000 on a concrete box because controlling the environment was the only way I knew to express love. That engine said, calculate the route, inventory the resources, game the variables, build the plan. And then I heard Vanessa's voice. Not on the radio, in my head. Don't build anything, just bring her home. We go to Waynesville, I said. We find her. We bring her home. Owen nodded. Simple as that? Simple as that. We found a working vehicle in the camp, a civilian pickup someone had abandoned near the gate. Keys in the visor, half a tank. It started on the second try. Owen drove. I navigated with a paper map from the Humvee's glove box, marking our route down the 44 corridor toward Waynesville. The highway south was easier. Less congestion, fewer vehicles, wider sight lines. The infected were present but scattered one every half mile, standing on shoulders and medians, oriented toward nothing. The landscape opened into the deep Ozarks. The hills I knew from 20 years of building houses on their ridges. The hollows I'd explored as a teenager growing up in Eureka. The rivers I'd fished with my own father before he died and left me with a fear of loss so profound I'd tried to pour concrete over it. That's the thing I hadn't said. Not to Vanessa, not to Owen, not to myself. The bunker wasn't about the end of the world. It was about my father dying in a hospital room I wasn't prepared for when I was 23. Prostate cancer, diagnosed late, advanced fast. 3 months from symptom to funeral. I walked into that hospital room, and there was nothing I could do. No tool, no plan, no material. Just a body in a bed, shutting down, and me standing there with empty hands. I'd been building against that feeling ever since. Every house, every renovation, every system and structure and redundancy. And finally, the bunker, the biggest, most expensive, most comprehensive defense against the possibility that the world would take someone from me, and I'd be standing there again, with nothing in my hands. Vanessa had seen it. She'd never said it this way, but she'd seen it. The bunker wasn't preparation. It was grief-wearing work boots. Owen drove, and I watched the Ozarks roll past, and I understood, for the first time, that bringing Chloe home wouldn't justify the bunker. Nothing would justify the bunker. The bunker was a fact, like the divorce, like the money, like the years I'd spent underground while my children grew up in the sunlight. The only question left was whether I could be the kind of man who walked away from the thing he built and toward the people who didn't ask for it. We reached the outskirts of Waynesville at dusk. Fort Leonard Wood's perimeter was visible from the highway fencing, guard towers, lights. Actual electric lights, powered and operational. The first manufactured illumination I'd seen since October 11th that wasn't battery-powered or burning. Owen slowed the truck. We looked at the lights. In the gathering dark of an Ozark evening, with the dead standing in fields and parking lots for miles behind us, those lights were the most beautiful and terrifying thing I'd ever seen. Beautiful because they meant power, structure, continuity. Terrifying because they meant someone was deciding who got in and who didn't. And decisions like that have edges that cut. The gate was manned. Real soldiers, armed, alert, positioned behind barriers that looked recently reinforced. Owen stopped the truck 50 yards out, and we waited. A spotlight hit us. A voice on a bullhorn told us to exit the vehicle with our hands visible. We complied. They searched us, took the firearms, ran our names through a system that still functioned. Someone had a laptop connected to a generator-powered server, and the database returned results. Graham Breck, Owen Breck. No warrants, no flags. Civilian. "What's your purpose?" a sergeant asked. "I'm looking for my daughter, Chloe Breck, 16. She may have come in with a civilian group from the Hazelwood area, relocated from the Eureka checkpoint around October 14th. He looked at his laptop, typed, waited, typed again. I stood in the floodlit gate of a military installation and watched a stranger scroll through a database that contained or didn't contain my daughter's name. And I felt every wall I'd ever built, the bunker walls, the emotional walls, the walls of planning and preparation and control, reduced to this: a man waiting for someone else to tell him if his child was alive. Breck, Chloe M., the sergeant read. DOB March 9th. Arrived October 14th with Hazelwood Church Group. Assigned to civilian housing, Building 14. Owen grabbed my arm. Not a hug, a grip, an anchor. I didn't speak because speaking would have broken something I needed intact, to walk through the gate and down the road and into Building 14. She was sitting on a cot in a room with 11 other people, playing cards with a woman in her 60s. She looked up when the door opened, and she saw Owen first. And then she saw me, and her face did something I will not describe, because it belongs to her, and not to this story. "Dad," she said. I crossed the room. I didn't build anything. I didn't plan anything. I didn't engineer the embrace, or calculate its duration, or design its emotional architecture. I held my daughter, and she held me, and Owen stood in the doorway, and the room was not underground, was not reinforced, was not rated for 7,000 pounds of force. It was a cinder block barracks with fluorescent lighting and a card table and other people's belongings on other people's cots. It was the safest place I'd ever been. We drove back 3 days later. All three of us in the truck, Chloe in the middle, Owen driving, me navigating the paper map and the back roads and the terrain I'd spent my whole life building on. The drive home took 9 hours. We stopped twice. Neither stop was eventful. Vanessa was topside when we pulled in. She'd heard the truck from inside the bunker. The acoustic monitoring system I'd installed picked up the engine half a mile out. She was standing beside the shed in the afternoon light. And when Chloe got out of the truck, the sound Vanessa made was not a word. It was older than language. We went below. 4 people, 4 bunks, 4 toothbrush holders. The bunker worked. It hummed and circulated and filtered and sustained. And it would keep us alive for as long as we needed it to. That was its function. I built it for $500,000. And it performed exactly as specified. But I'd spent 6 years building the wrong thing, and 10 days learning that the distance that matters is never the one you can measure on a map. The bunker saved my life. I don't dispute that. But the walk through the dead with my son beside me, and the gate I couldn't open myself, and the cot in a cinder block room where my daughter was playing cards with a stranger that saved something the bunker was never designed to protect. I still go down and check the systems every morning. Old habit. The lights come on, the fans run, the water's clean. Everything works. Then I come up, and the 4 of us sit at a folding table on the surface, and we eat breakfast in the open air, where nothing is reinforced, where nothing is sealed, where the only thing between us and the world is the decision to stay at the table together. That's enough. It was always supposed to be enough.